Hello everyone, today I'm going to go through how I did a CVT flush and filter change on my 2016 Nissan Maxima. This should apply to any 2016 Plus model, also known as the 8th gen. With that said, let me go ahead and tell you what I did. So first I went to nissanpartsdeal.com and I put my VIN in to find the exact parts I needed for my Maxima. I don't know if the CVTs have changed slightly from year to year, so it's quite important you do this as you might not get the right part. The parts here on this site are also genuine Nissan parts and they're quite comparable to Amazon prices. Second, I ordered 12 quarts of Nissan NS3 CVT fluid off eBay. This should be a good amount of fluid to flush through the system. I don't think you need any more than this, and it's cheapest when you buy it in 6-quart packs from sellers on eBay. Changing the fluid is actually a relatively simple process. I did a first flush, and what this did was cycling out 6 quarts of new fluid into the system. I'll show you how I did that. And by doing this, I drove the car only for a couple days to work the next week, so maybe racked up about 100 miles on it. But because of that allowed the fluid to get hot and start cleaning through the transmission, getting deposits, any other suspended solids in the transmission. It sucked to the new fluid so that it can clean it out. Then that following weekend, that's when I drained that other set of fluid and dropped the pan. I changed out all the filters and the strainer, and I put everything back together, cycled out another 6 quarts of fluid, and with that, the job was complete. Do know if you're going to do this job yourself, you are taking it at your own risk. Now, when it comes to ordering parts, it's rather simple. The first thing I got was a spare gasket, because after you drop the pan, you're going to have to replace that. Next, I got a replacement filter for the control valve. You're also going to need a new seal when you change this filter out. So I got 2 of those simply because it was so cheap. You're also going to need a new crush washer for the bottom of the pan. You can choose to get another bolt if you like to. I didn't see the reason to, but I got 2 of those also just in case, and that way I have a spare. And last, you're going to need another strainer. Lastly, don't forget to order your new CVT fluid. This is simply a small diagram showing you everything that we're going to be changing. The only thing not shown is the strainer, and that is inside of the pan, but that way you can see that these are the parts that you're going to need. After jacking the car up in the center in the air, you don't have to get that high because it's going to have to go back a level anyway to drain. You're going to first get the splash guard off. These are held in by a few body clips, and using a flathead screwdriver you can pop them right off. Now that you have access to the bottom of the pan, you're going to use a 19mm socket to pop off that drain bolt. Make sure you have a drain pan underneath. After removing the bolt, the pan is going to start draining the hot fluid out into the drain pan. We're going to let it do that for a little bit, but make sure you get the car back down level to get as much of the old fluid out as possible. Stop when you start hearing a slow drip, and then raise the car back up and put the bolt back on. In order to know how much fluid to put back into the transmission, we're going to have to let the fluid that we just drained reach ambient temperature. This will let us know exactly how much we're going to have to put back in once we pour that fluid into some sort of measuring container. Now, this might vary just depending on your year model, but I got 1.5 quarts exactly after I drained it out, so I put 1.5 quarts back in, and this will make it very convenient down the line. In order to fill the transmission back up, we're going to have to remove the dipstick cap, which is right by the side of the engine. There actually isn't a dipstick in here, it's just a cap for one. It can easily be removed with a hook tool. There's a little plastic insert on the inside that you just push out of the way and pull out. With that cap removed, we can now stick a long funnel into the dipstick line and fill it back up. Now we're going to go ahead and fill our transmission back up with fluid. As I said before, it was 1.5 quarts for me. Make sure you do not overfill. Put exactly back in what came out. But after you're said and done with that, replace the cap, and then we're going to go inside the car, turn it on, and start our process of getting the fluid moving through the transmission. The purpose of this next part is to get our new fluid starting to move through the transmission so that it can get through all the different areas, mix in with the old fluid, and as we keep draining and refilling, we're going to get more and more new fluid in there, which is going to clean up and out the old fluid. This is a quite simple process. We're going to turn on the car, let the engine idle for a little bit, anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds or so, just enough till the revs start dropping, and then we're going to row through each of the different gear selections. And by doing that, we're going to go into one. Make sure you're holding the brake down, by the way, and hold it there for a few to several seconds. Go to the next one, keep doing that, and then hold it going all the way back up. That'll make sure that it goes through the transmission governor and gets all the old fluid out. So to finish this first round of flushes, what we're going to do is turn the car back off once you're finished with this procedure you see on the screen. again. We're going to drain it, refill it again, turn the car back on, and go through the gears again, and rinse and repeat until you get through with right about 6 quarts. For the second part of this flush, there's a little bit of difference of opinion. I personally chose to drive the car another couple of days before I continued flushing and changing out the filters. You can do that only in one day. If you really want to change everything else out, just go ahead and drive the car for about 20 or so minutes to get it hot before continuing on. So now we're going to go ahead and start draining again. Make sure your car's up on jack stands this time because we're going to start taking it all apart. So right there, you're going to go ahead and see the control valve housing with the filter in it. There are 4 10mm bolts, and a couple of them are kind of hard to access, so I used a flare nut wrench and some bendy socket adapters for my 10mm to get them off.
And as we can see, we got the 10mm bolts off of this filter housing, and it is starting to drain a little bit into the pan, so good thing I had my drain pan underneath, but as soon as it drains out a little bit more, we'll pop her off. And there we have our old filter and the old seal. We'll be replacing both of those. For the sake of comparison, our old filter is on top and our new filter is down below. Alright, as we can see, we got our new filter and our new seal on, so we're going to go ahead and get the housing back on. Do not torque this down too hard. I would also just do a finger tight torque around the first time and do it in a cross pattern, then torque it down with a 10mm, but again, these don't need high torque, so be careful.
We're now going to go ahead and drop the pan. Go ahead and start removing the bolts carefully from the rear towards the front, and we're going to do this because that way the pan will start to slide off the back at the rear and fluid will go into the pan rather than having it drop all at once.
All of the bolts off, and it started draining from the back as expected into the pan, and I just kind of let the pan actually fall into the bigger pan. We're going to be cleaning it up anyway, and I'll show you how to do that, so it's not too much of a concern for me. But now you can actually see at the very bottom of the transmission, that actually right there is our strainer. We'll be changing that out too, but we're going to let that drippity drip for just a little bit more.
As a point of comparison, we're going to show our old strainer versus our new one. As we can see, the filtering material in the new strainer looks a lot nicer than that old blacked out material in the old strainer.
Time to clean up the pan. So luckily this is a rather easy process. All you really need to do is first get off some of the excess transmission oil, and then get some brake parts cleaner, make sure it isn't chlorinated, and obviously just spray the crap out of it inside and out and wipe off any excess. I already got the magnets off and cleaned those up, so we're just going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, now with everything cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and get our new strainer on. There is just 2 bolts that held mine in, and this part with the rubber gasket goes up top. Make sure you go ahead and you see that little dangling thing there, that's actually a sensor. Make sure that you put that back into place. Alright, so we got the strainer back on. Make sure that you actually physically pop the top side port with the gasket around it into place, because it doesn't just slip in, it needs to be pushed in. And make sure you get your sensor back where it needs to go as well. Torque these down. Don't torque them too tight, but just tight enough. Now to get the pan with the gasket back on to the bottom of the transmission, first off, make sure you clean around the sealing surface very well. Really the method I like to do is, luckily there's some line-up holes on the bottom of this transmission, little line-up pins, as you can see right there. And there's another one over there that helped to guide it into place. I just like to get it on there and then just start taking bolts. I've got my bolts right beside me, and just start hand tightening in there. You don't have to worry too much about getting what order, just get it on enough so that the pan starts holding itself up, and then you can start getting the rest in, and then we'll go through the tightening process.
So now I've got all the bolts hand tightened down, and I would suggest you do the same. In a little bit I'm going to go ahead and post a diagram that show what order they need to be torqued down. In order to torque them down, I used a screwdriver that could accept a 10mm hex bit and use that. You could also use something small like a 1/4 inch mini ratchet, but the point is you don't want to tighten these down all the way the first time, and there's not a torque spec, but these things cannot handle much torque, and I really want to emphasize that you will strip them otherwise. So go slow, make multiple passes, and do not get them too tight.
So we've got all of our bolts tightened back down, and don't forget to put your drain bolt back on there. We're going to go ahead and get the car back level and fill her back up.
Now it is time to fill the transmission back up. This time I actually had about 2 3/4 worth of quarts come out, all said and done, from removing all the different filters and dropping the pan and everything. So that's as much as I'm going to put back in. And we're going to repeat the same process we did in the very beginning of the video of filling the transmission back up with fluid, turning the car back on, going through the gears again to make sure that all the fluid mixes together. Then we'll go ahead and get it up in the air, drain it again, refill it again until we get up to our 12 quarts. Skipping ahead to the final drain, it's now time to pay attention to that drain plug. We're going to go ahead and get that old crush washer off. I really had to use some pliers and, flathead screwdriver and all that to really work it off, but we're going to do that, and then we're going to go ahead and install the new crush washer, which you can see is shaped significantly different. After hitting the drain bolt with our good friend the brake clean, we've got the new crush washer installed. Notice how the beveled edge is up top. There's a sort of flat edge that threads onto the bolt and sits at the very bottom. That is how it's supposed to be, and we're going to go ahead and install it. Now, the one thing to keep in mind here as a word of caution is that it can be very hard to sense when a crush washer has crushed as it's supposed to while torquing it down. So have a lot of precaution, go slow installing it, and go and feel with your fingers and visually examine to make sure that you aren't going to over torque this. Okay, reinstall your body clips and you are good to go. Everything should be good. Now it's just time to refill her back up. Filling the transmission back up for the final time with the fluid it requires. You are all said and done. Make sure that you pull out the funnel, clean up a little bit, and replace your dipstick cap. Now here comes a little bit of discussion on how often should you do this job. I think that the fluid needs to be changed at a minimum of every 40,000 miles. I know that the technical service manual says you can go longer and all that, but I really don't believe that's good because mine was at 80,000 miles when I changed it. My fluid was very dark, smelly, and just, not good at all. For these filters and the strainer, I don't know if you really need to change that every 40,000 after this point, because mostly all they do is just catch little tiny metal chips that the magnets also catch and filter that out, and you're going to have most of that from the factory break-in process when the car is new. So you can probably go, up to 80,000 miles without having to change these again, but if you want to be thorough, go ahead and change them out every 40,000 miles too, but that is it. Go ahead and enjoy driving your car now, because I know mine felt a lot better after I did this.